So this is 22nd of October 2020, and we are marking the demonstration, the first demonstration Kudilar campaign organized on the 22nd of October 2004 in the Brick Lane area and in the actual street called Greater X Street. And the picture was taken by several photographers. Now it's not clear which photographer took this particular one, but this is a setting. It's actually the main setting of the demonstration that lasted just under two hours. And in the picture here is yes, the picture here shows me speaking, and we shall be running more kind of impressions and aspects of this later today. And this is, so 2004 to 2020, 16 years coming on to 17th year, calendar year. And that was the demonstration that we held in the Greater X Street, because it was the spot where we stood there in the Greater X Street on the pavement, opposite a building that was used by the two local councillors at that time for the council ward that was called Spitalfields and Bangla Town, so covering the Brick Lane area, or most of Brick Lane. And it covered the actual kind of spot where the Crossrail plot to dig the hole was situated. That was between the Princelet Street and the Hanbury Street. And that particular location for the demonstration on Friday, tomorrow is Friday 23rd October, but the Friday the 22nd of October 2004, our demonstration was held opposite that building used by the two councillors, in place at the time. Neither of them is in place now. One was Abbas Uddin alias Halal, and the other one was Lutfur Rahman alias Lutfur Rahman, who later became the incumbent. 6 years after that, he became elected mayor in October 2010. So he was then in place for 5 calendar years. So 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So he was in place, in post for 6 calendar years until 23rd of April 2015, when he was kicked out by the election commissioner, a man called Richard Morey. Richard Morey is a licensed law trader and has had kind of stints as election commissioner about Birmingham council corruption as well. And we shall be updating on Richard Morey as well. But today's marking of the demonstration, 16th, 17th year since the demonstration of 22nd of October 2004, will contain a lot of updates on the role of local councillors and the role of local councils, and the role in particular of the local Tower Hamlets Council as a tout agency, as a tout outfit. As the evidence shows, as the length of it shows, we had to focus on that council's behavior based entirely on the evidence of its conduct as a stooge outfit. Stooging and touting for the attack on the local community plotted by big business. And their agenda was, the big business agenda was being fronted by the generally transport linked plausibility called updating the transport service in London via the Crossrail project. As we have said on the evidence, it's not conjecture, it's not open to dispute. It is published facts, facts that have not been disputed by Ken Lying-Still Livingstone, because it was the fact, one of the facts concerning Ken Lying-Still Livingstone's corruption and corrupt abuse of his post as mayor at the expense of London was the report published by the so-called Fleet Street's Sunday Times and the Evening Standard, or maybe Sunday Times only. We can check that. Alleging against Ken Livingstone that he had received cash donation made by the person, one of the three Guinness crooks, the Guinness criminals who were jailed, and one of the criminals had paid a political donation to Ken Lying-Still Livingstone, because that crook was setting up this Heron Tower, Heron, Heron Tower in Bishopsgate, which is opposite the Bishop's entrance to the Bishopsgate entrance to the Liverpool Street Station complex. Heron Tower is a tall building. And in order to avoid the space that Heron Tower stands on, the Crossrail alignment, the line, was diverted away from it, significantly diverted a few hundred yards to the north, going east, so northeast. And the only purpose for diverting that was to avoid the Heron Tower being affected by the location of the, then it was still to be built. It was not built yet, but that was in planning. And the Heron Tower was owned by this one of the three Guinness criminals, convicted jailbirds, who donated money to Ken Livingstone. Now that convicted criminal was not a supporter of the Labour Party, nor had been known to be in any way sympathetic with the Labour Party. And yet he was reported to have made a donation, £10,000 or thereabouts, to Ken Lying-Still Livingstone's re-election campaign for the 2004 election for the post of mayor. And that was solely a bribe. And Ken Lying-Still Livingstone took a bribe from a convicted criminal, and as a result of that bribe and connection, mysteriously, the plot for the alignment of the Crossrail line was changed, avoiding the site of the proposed Heron Tower and going straight through Brick Lane, in the middle of Brick Lane, middle of Princelet Street and Hanbury Street. We found out all of these, quite apart from the Sunday Times revelation later, much later. We found out at the time, say 2003, December 2003 and thereabouts, that it was nothing to do with engineering, nothing to do with the kind of consideration of what is the best technological kind of route. It was solely to do with bribery and corruption. So when we found out that the plot was actually diverted and Brick Lane was going to be destroyed, we had no option on the evidence, on the facts at that time, 2003, but to mobilize the campaign. And the slogan that I created at the time, at the beginning, was to flood the area with literature condemning the Tower Hamlets Council and, of course, the others, including the GLC. Because Tower Hamlets Council, as the local council, tokenistically had a kind of role on the planning matters about whichever section of the borough was affected by whatever planning, the local council, as the quote local council, had a tokenistic say. But this council was full of personnel who needed no kind of description, either whether they're tokenistically or enthusiastically, mentally servile. And all of these corrupt councillors joined the wider agenda of Ken Livingstone being bribed by one of the three convicted Guinness criminals from the City of London. And so therefore we were left with no option but to oppose financially some of the biggest kind of crooks and operators, aided and abetted by two elected entities. And the kind of comparison in terms of resource, in terms of manpower, womanpower, does not even begin to take place, because we didn't have the man or woman power, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the money, and we most certainly didn't have any significant number of individuals available to spend any time in doing the campaign. So how did we do it? We did it by relying on evidence, on fact, on the veracity and accuracy and the authenticity and the morality and the ethical kind of entitlements based on universal values. And we depended on those, first of all, foremost, and depended on my time and my abilities and skills and my commitment that had been the same commitment defending the victims of wrongs and advocating for the rights on behalf of the victims and in defense of the community, as this time happened again. Defending the Brick Lane area, and in kind of context of its links with the UK-based Bangladeshis, started in a big way the first time since Bangladesh was kind of recognized in early 1972, following the 16th of December kind of surrender to the Indian army by the then Pakistan army in Dhaka, in the racecourse field situated to the east of the University of Dhaka complex, the east immediately of the mosque where the rebel poet Kabi Nazrul Islam is buried, according to his wish, as expressed in his poem, that Mosjideri Pashe Amar Kobor Dio Bhai. That is where this all began. So 1972 is the first substantive year of Bangladesh as a recognized country. And this defense of the Brick Lane community in the UK was the first substantive political action by the members of the newly members of the community that are from and descended from the newly recognized Bangladesh. And that was a political action to defend the ordinary political, social rights of the community, not about the independence that had been fought for in the year 1971. So this action in December 1973, which is exactly 10 years before the campaign against Crossrail began, or was later to begin in December 2003. Not 2003, not 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. 2003 and 1993, 1983, 1973. So that's 30 years. 30 years earlier, I started the campaign defending Brick Lane against the defamation of the whole community, and particularly the defamation of the Bangladeshis and Siloti speaking, Siloti background Bangladeshis that were identified as being the Bangladeshis in Brick Lane and in Whitechapel. So 73, 83, 93, 2000, 30 years earlier. So what I did 30 years earlier, exactly in December 1973, was updated, if you like, in the defense of the community and the area against Crossrail in December 2003. And a year later, after we started the campaign against the Crossrail plot, a year later, on this day, 22nd of October 2004, we mounted the demonstration against the Tower Hamlets Council, which was led by, within quotes, led by or misled by Abbas Uddin alias Halal. Because he, Abbas Uddin alias Halal, refused to cooperate with the communities saying no to the Crossrail whole plot. And he said to me, when I gave him an opportunity the like of which he nor any other councillor or anybody else has ever given me, I gave him the opportunity, Abbasuddin alias Halal, to cooperate with me and the community, and then we would leave the council alone. We would not focus on the role of the council, because if he cooperated, then the role would change and would then kind of rule out the necessity of our having to focus and concentrate on the role of the Tower Hamlets Council. And Abbasuddin Halal, alias Halal has been a new kind of invention. He was never known as anything other than Abbasuddin or Abbas. But he introduced this Halal bit way recently compared to the majority of his time. Now, Abbas Uddin alias Halal told me, without a long conversation, it was just a conversation that lasted a few minutes. He said he had to follow the party policy. And the party policy was to support the Crossrail plot. When he said that, he extinguished any basis for him ever to say that I didn't give him the chance. I did give him the chance, and he consciously refused to take that chance and opportunity to cooperate with the community. And from then onwards, we had our kind of plan and our political action and social action alignment clearly set to the point where we would continue up to the point until that plot was scrapped, abandoned, dropped, and stopped. And the whole was stopped, but it took years of our battle. And the first action we took was on this day, 22nd of October 2004. And we staged and held the demonstration opposite the building, where on that Friday, 22nd of October 2004, neither Lutfur Rahman nor Abbasuddin alias Halal was present. We later learned, but the point was to hold the demonstration in public. And we shall be continuing, remembering and updating on that. Back to today's edition 1 of the original world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. Now, the Daily Mirror is running a very kind of apt follow-up. And this one is featuring the 22-year-old footballer whose campaign for free school meals was kind of attacked and opposed by the conservative MPs yesterday. But the mainstream media, we shall not be referring to the mainstream media that includes the Daily Mirror, because that is clearly doing the correct kind of headline, or correct, one of the options. But the other media, including The Guardian, they're using the phrase that MPs have rejected Labour's plan for these free school meals. But that is completely typical, and it gives away the kind of real agenda operated by The Guardian and others in Fleet Street and the mainstream so-called media. That they don't consider Labour MPs as MPs. They consider Tories as synonymous with MPs, not the Labour. And they miss the point that school meals, free school meals, is one of the most important provisions that children of parents and guardians who are in low income or no income are entitled to have that kind of support. And when looked at from the standpoint of the 12 billion pounds that Johnson et al. Gave to Dido Harding and other big business criminals under the covers of doing test and trace and whatever, it is quite clear that the modest amount, which would be much less, far less than the 12 billion, to provide the free school meals to children should have been adopted, should have been agreed. And it was a violation of all the international treaties, obligations, conventions that the UK remained signed up to. And this is the kind of week when even UK will join in marking the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations Organization. And the corrupt, criminal, lying, completely criminal, lying Daily Express is running this diversion. If they asked people affected by the policies of penalizing the North by Johnson, no one would even remember Brexit. But that's what they are still kind of capitalizing on, trying to capitalize on. Now, this is a piece in the Irish Post, and it is for this piece that our campaign paid £1.50 today for the copy of the Irish Post. And this is about the rights of the Gaelic speakers. And this is something that we shall elaborate on and update on later. But that is the headline, morally wrong, because the Gaelic speakers have been denied the permission and the right to use Gaelic for the inscription on the grave of one of their family members. So this is tip of the iceberg. This is what is happening. We shall be elaborating on that and updating on that contextually later. This is not a part of the Fleet Street papers, but for the moral and ethical and evidential significance, we obtained that copy and we paid £1.50 for it. Just one page, the front page, so that we could include that in the diagnosis of the Fleet Street media. Fleet Street media doesn't have any time for the Gaelic community or the Gaelic speakers. So there is no way that news, that event, that kind of morally wrong behavior would have been covered or would have been featured in any of the Fleet Street papers, including this newspaper, which is overhyped and overstated as a kind of trendy kind of version of the Independent that is no longer available in print. And this one is not owned by the two beards, Evgeny Lebedov, who is the briber of Boris Johnson, who is one of the bribers of Boris Johnson, who has returned the bribery by pushing this Lebedov into the House of Peers. That is how brazen the corruption is. So this is no longer owned by that two bears. And that is probably one reason why they can run as many items about Boris Johnson's wrongdoing and cruelty and criminality as they are able to do. But still, politically, the newspaper is as timid and as corrupt and as racist as the rest of the Fleet Street. And this is about Boris Johnson's career. The Daily Star is doing another joke front page. It shows the actual contempt for the evidence and the rights of the millions that are being trodden on and denied and deprived by the Johnson and the Tories. That this is the sister title, so-called, to the daily Beaverbrook, the Liars Express, which suppresses the truth. So we call it Daily Suppress. And the Murdoch Sun, which we call scum because of its scummy role, is doing another one. But the thing is that it does overhype for the Little Englanders and the gullibles, this so-called appeal of kind of patriotism, and it is doing pages and pages. On page 2, they have got a picture of Priti Patel looking like a fascist with a hard hat on, and they're running this headline, UK controls own borders. From that kind of headline, it would appear that the UK is under daily invasion from the Turks or some other similarly hated kind of hordes of attackers from the outer space. But there is nothing like that happening. And again, with the remark that we made earlier, this is the week when the United Nations Foundation 75 years ago is going to be officially marked. And they are chucking all the UN aims and objects and agreements and charters and conventions into the channel as they overhype this appeal for patriotism. This is the one on page 1, the Poppy appeal, and their intention is to hype up patriotic fervor and racist hatred. Now, what is this daughter of migrants who is carrying out the agenda of the anti-migrants in the extreme? What is to be her name, her kind of tag and a label? And underneath that Brexit Britain, the corrupt scum runs a piece saying Brexit, EU back at talks, as if the EU is the kind of naughty child that absconded and was found doing a disappearing, vanishing act, and it is back at talk. That's not the case. The evidence is that it is the Johnson-fronted cabal that has been overhyping the relevance of the Brexit thing in order to kind of show that Johnson is doing something while he is kind of starving millions across the north of the vital support that they need. And then this scum has got kind of as if it hasn't got enough space to overhype this patriotism. Campaign to Save Remembrance Fund. This is another 2-page spread. On top of the page 1, page 2, Priti Patel, and on the next pages 4 and 5. It's patriotism, it's racism. It's not talking about anything to do with stopping the idea of war or wars or imperialism. And they've got 2 pages of promotion for Boris Johnson. And it is blaming the Labour Party, not Boris Johnson. 2 pages by the lying Murdoch, lying scum. That's not true. That what it is running there, the 2 pages of 8 and 9, is absolutely false and untrue and misleading. And intentionally so. And it is actually, the scum is running a pro Boris Johnson editorial headlined "Lockdown Loon." Who is it calling the loon? So they're calling Keir Starmer a failure and a loon. And then they're running the migrant folly, another racist, anti-migrant kind of editorial. So there is no end to the lies and hatred and corruption and criminal inventions by the Murdoch scum. So this is why, I mean, the phrase dirty digger doesn't do enough to explain the role played by the scum for decades in lying to the people and brainwashing the gullibles. The editorial, so-called, which is headlined "Lockdown Loon," admits, which is completely upside down, because when Keir Starmer was at the CPS, that is, as the Director of Public Prosecutions, they were not once singling out any of his right-wing reactionary measures and behavior and steps. Now, in a twisted plot to discredit him as the Labour Party opposition, they're saying that where did Starmer earn his forensic reputation? given so many rash misjudgments. Now we are the ones exclusively raising the question on the evidence that Keir Starmer has no forensic skills. We have been saying it for months, if not longer. So they are catching up. So this is the one that they say, where did Starmer earn his forensic reputation, given so many rash misjudgments, his many failures as director of public prosecutions, his elections losing people's vote obsession, and now this means that his opposition to the tier 3 impositions by Johnson. So the Murdoch scum is as horribly wrong and untruthful and racist and corrupt and spreading fake news and fake opinions as it ever has been since Murdoch took over. I mean, the first editor that was in place for a very long time was Larry Lamb. Complete crook, liar, hater, racist, and idiot. And then the other one was Kelvin McKenzie. These are totally corrupt and irrational and hateful people. So if they edit and commission the contents of the paper, the gullible majority across England, excluding places like Liverpool, have no actual alternative access to any alternative to the scum, because that is the still highest circulation print paper. Although the circulation figures are millions down by millions, several millions, still it remains the top circulation tabloid. And that is why it is important to examine its lying and lies, because it lies to so many people who have no access to an alternative platform or alternative way of knowing what is actually going on. And the scum is not helping people. It's not serving the community. It's not helping the people in this country. And that is why it's so important to point out its follies and its lying and its corruption. And the kind of pornographic kind of agenda continues on the Daily Mail, because after the scum is the Daily Mail, which in terms of circulation among the gullibles is the next highest one. There is no other competition. There is no real competition. The Mirror is not as successful in terms of circulation as either the scum or the Daily Mail. And the fact that the Mirror always lags behind these two, and we shall check the latest figures if they're available any longer, because apparently the newspapers have changed and kind of abandoned their membership of the Audit Bureau of Circulation, in brief called the ABC. Audit Bureau of Circulation used to be for decades the source of the most reliable kind of numbers and statistics on the numbers of copies being actually circulated by these print titles. Recently, in the last 6 months or a year, some of the Fleet Street papers have abandoned the ABC kind of membership, claiming that the ABC membership, ABC kind of statistics, and ABC surveys were not reliable enough, which is absolute rubbish. As compared to the scum, the Daily Mail and the others, the ABC is way ahead in accuracy and reliability. So, but we shall check that and then come back with the accurate figure as available on the circulation of the Daily Mail and this Scum and the other tabloids. Now, this is a historic kind of corrupt piece by the Mail, attributing it to the breaker of the NHS, Jeremy Hunt. And Hunt is being reported here by the Daily Mail as saying now is the time to fix broken social care. Remember, our narrative, evidential narrative, is and has been to point out that since its foundation 70 odd years ago, the National Health Service in the UK has been neglected, abandoned, and it has been only used when it has been useful for slogan making by the Labour Party. The Labour Party, we have said, asserted on the evidence, has neglected the NHS. By that we mean the idea of the NHS is there, but the idea of the NHS has not been implemented. For 95% of the cases, the idea of the NHS remains elusive and unimplemented. And we have said, as we did yesterday, Wednesday, the 21st of October, 2020, the NHS should have been provided right from the beginning of the foundation or launching or inauguration of the NHS. There should have been two things. One, the education program fit for preparing NHS service providers like nurses, like doctors and others, specifically geared to making their expertise or skills available at the point of need, without discrimination, without prejudice, without racism, without ignorance, based entirely on actual universal values. And the other is the monitoring, ongoing monitoring of what was going on, both on the ground as the NHS and also at the institutions that were in place. They are not in place, but they should have been in place to prepare generations every year, personnel, to work at all levels of the NHS. This is one of the original manifesto contributions by our campaign. Nobody else has said that. No mainstream, no side stream, no upstream, no downstream platform has ever said what we are saying about the NHS. And this Jeremy Hunt was in post for too long as the cabinet minister at the expense of the National Health Service. And he was not actually held to account by the so-called vocal Labour Party MPs who were supporting unions in the NHS. Now, as uniquely stated, advocated, and promoted by me, this is the analysis. Trade unions are only of limited value to the community, the rest of the community, rest of society. Because by definition, the British trade unions are allowed to operate, to exist, to recruit members, etc., to defend and protect their work-related kind of rights and entitlements and conditions. By definition, by constitution, they are not in existence to support the whole wider list of needs and rights of society. So there is a kind of built-in conflict between the trade unions and the rest of society. If and when, and it happens often, the trade unions work-related issues become urgent for them, then that is what they give priority to. And that includes by attacking, neglecting, violating the wider needs of society. Now, that is, in a nutshell, the equation, which is a false and unjustifiable kind of equation that gives the power, because trade unions are organized power. Members of society cannot be organized in that kind of disciplined way as trade unions. So they are, in effect, in logistical terms, an organized army for each union, each field. Whereas in society, there is nothing like that to defend the social other needs and to hold the trade unions to account when they violate the rights of the rest of society. Think about that. This is why trade unions have been able to completely kind of, this is an XXXX up the real manifesto that society needs. And that has to be substantially replaced by removing trade unions' priority, rights and entitlements for their members away from the platform of society at the expense of society. If trade unions pursue anything that is at the expense of the rest of society, then that should be moderated and made subject to relegation beneath the priority of the rest of society. If that happens, then the trade unions are subject to accountability. As it doesn't happen, trade unions are not really subject to accountability. So, for example, the union called Unite, fronted for the last many years by Len McCluskey. McCluskey is a dim-witted, ignorant, and very ill-educated, ill-schooled person. Despite the slogans, McCluskey has been an anti-democratic influence on the Labour Party, whose appeal to the ordinary people in society has been reduced when it has been forced to follow the corrupt, ignorant, and stupid and anti-democratic agenda under the pressures from McCluskey-fronted Unite, because it has given money to the Labour Party in the sums that no other source has contributed to the Labour Party. And inside the kind of prison that McCluskey-funded Labour Party created, there was no accountability demands. There was no process of accountability going on. So what we are saying about the Jeremy Hunt attacks on the NHS is that because of all of these defects, the Labour Party MPs who protested against Jeremy Hunt being the member of cabinet at the expense of the NHS and the health service were not on the agenda, not on the message. They were off the message, and they were talking as representatives of the unions rather than representatives of the objective truth and needs that ordinary people have, and whose needs and rights and emergencies were being trodden on by the Jeremy Hunt kind of led attacks on the idea of the NHS. So for him to say, now is time to fix broken social care, is a lie at various levels. He is the one who attacks, even now, as he says, he attacks the very idea, the notion, the principle of social care, because he attacks society. And without society being recognized in full, and the social obligations and societal obligations being recognized on universal standards, you cannot fix social care, because social care, the absence of social care or the presence of social care is very much linked to it and dependent on whether the rest of society acknowledges the needs of the people who are in need of social care. And the Conservatives, Jeremy Hunt for 6-7 years as cabinet member for the Conservatives at the expense of health care and health services and social services, has been the main attacker of the social care kind of priorities and social care needs. So they are attacking social care, they are attacking the idea of the National Health Service, they are attacking people who need help during this emergency under the COVID-19. And they're attacking schools, they're attacking the kind of state sector of the schools, as they did of the fiasco, as they call it, over the algorithm robbery a few months ago. And there is no collected commentary every day. There is no narrative based on all that evidence coming from the Labour Party. And as if that is not bad enough, the stupidity of Angela Rayner, now why she was promoted in the first place, is something that we know but we cannot broadcast because it's too kind of personal. Angela Rayner is not a bright kind of individual. So there had to be some other reason why she was given a frontline shadow cabinet post by Corbyn. And the fact that she is not bright it matters, because she allowed the likes of Lisa Nandi, who is a plant for the right in the Labour Party, to hijack the actual sufferings and the plight of the people across the north for years. And Corbyn, being stupid in the context that we have defined, his stupidity, didn't even notice. So instead of it being anti-Semitism that sank Corbyn, it was his stupidity that sank Corbyn. Because anti-Semitism and other issues and other allegations that were leveled at him should have been handled much better and to his advantage, to Labour Party's leadership's advantage, the Labour Party's advantage, if Corbyn were intelligent. But he was not intelligent, he is not intelligent, and nor are his so-called advisors, including Seamus Mill. Now, Mill, decades ago, while he was associated with the Guardian, wrote a stupid piece about Brick Lane. And I told him off. I called him an idiot, ignorant moron, who was doing a disservice to the community in the east end of London, etc., etc. So, when Corbyn's main communications kind of coordinator was Seamus Mill, there was no chance that Corbyn would get in touch with the reality. And Angela Rayner has been forced into apologizing to a Conservative for calling him scum. And it is alleged in the Daily Mail, that is, that Cleese Clarkson, the Tory MP, whom Rayner called a scum, said the insult was hurled at him after he insinuated that members of the Labour Party front bench believed the pandemic was a good crisis to exploit. Well, that is not something that the Labour Party is exploiting at all. Labour Party has been unable to exploit, assuming that that was what they wanted to do, but they are not doing that. They are still not on top of the issue. And the issue is that the Boris Johnson fronted cabal is totally unfit to be in power. And that is the issue. And it is evident in everything that Johnson does and his cabal does. And there are pieces in the 2-page spread on the Daily Mail, pages 6 and 7. We've got 2 red-faced police chiefs and MP inquisitor. They're focusing on Yvette Cooper and 2 police persons. And they're saying about one police person, Assistant Chief Constable Owen Wetherill, saying, I haven't got the rules in front of me, so I can't give you a definitive answer. And the second policeman, Chief Constable Andy Rhodes, the big one moving from tier 2 to tier 3 is your household not mixing with others inside your house. And Yvette Cooper is allegedly reported as saying, this is the problem. I'd understood in tier 2 we couldn't meet other households indoors. Committee chairman Yvette Cooper corrected police chief's tier 2 error yesterday. And there are too many contradictory pieces in the Daily Mail that appear to be attacking the Labour Party, but also fail to show what is there in Boris Johnson's behavior and policies, so-called, and actions, so-called, that can be supported at all. And there is another 2-page spread on pages 8 and 9, which says Rishi's new lockdown millions. Now, they're promoting Rishi Sunak again. This is a corrupt, untruthful, false, misleading plug for Rishi Sunak, the UK finance minister in the cabinet of Boris Johnson. Because his billions, as is known now, have gone into the pocket of big business. And Rishi Sunak, although he's comparatively young, has had a longer than kind of justifiable career as a beneficiary of the hedge fund corruption that goes on in Britain and through the city of London. So Sunak is not as kind of above reproach as he has been painted to be by the Daily Mail and the others. And he has given money, billions of pounds, to Dido Harding and others, whereas he has starved very low-income people and small businesses. So this headline in the double-page spread, Rishi's new lockdown millions, is a double lie, because Rishi's new suggests that he has done this before, and he has been dishing out millions to the public. That is the absolute untruth. If he had been dishing out millions to the public, why is the North, Greater Manchester, Liverpool, Teesside, these places, Newcastle, why are they being starved of money that they need? And there is also a confession, but it is not being run by the Daily Mail as a confession to hurt the Conservatives. It's as if the Conservatives have nothing to do with it. It says £2 trillion national debt, the biggest for 60 years. And they say underneath it how the borrowing is piling up. 2.6 trillion national debt, or 103.5% of the GDP, highest as a percentage of economic output since 1960. And then they give list of other kind of debt piling up, but they don't blame the conservatives for it. The conservatives have been in power since May 19, 2010, and yet the Daily Mail doesn't say a word that it is the conservatives' fault for incurring such high amount of national, that is economically defined national debt in 60 years. If any fraction of that kind of debt were being incurred while the Labour Party, whoever the Labour Party leader was in power at number 10, the Daily Mail would unhesitatingly accuse the Labour Party for causing it. We shall be continuing with the evidence in the next part.